Welcome everyone to the Rubik's webinar series. And today we're going to be speaking with Rajni Sinha, who is the Chief Economist and Head of Research at Knight Frank. She has around 2 decades of experience in the field of macroeconomic research. Apart from the real estate sector, she has worked in the corporate sector and economic research again, and in financial services. So prior to Knight Frank, she worked with the Aditya Birla Group for 10 years and in financial institutions like Kotak Bank and JP Morgan. She is also a former colleague. She spent a little bit of time with us at Dun & Bradstreet in the early 2000s, or the earlier noughties as they called it. So Rajni, always good to have a familiar face on the chat and a friend. She writes regularly economic pieces for various business dailies, and she is an alumnus of the famous Delhi School of Economics and Lady Shri Ram College. So Rajni, welcome to this Rubik's webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time. When I was thinking of putting the topic together, you and I discussed it, and we said that we are hearing doomsday stories everywhere. Yes, there are lots of difficulties, and we'll talk about some of them today. But it's also not all gloom and doom, right? We may be battered, and it's an apt day to say this on a day when we have yet another issue, a cyclone, but we are not beaten. So with that, I'll start with my first question. That in 70 years, India has seen recessions only thrice. That is in 1958, 1966, and I think in 1980. And each time these recessions happened, they were caused by poor monsoons that hit agriculture. And, we use the word recession loosely, but recessions have happened in the true sense only thrice. 2020 looks like it's going to be a unique year where we're going to actually have a pretty bad recession in the Indian economy. Variety of experts and rating agencies are saying that. I think S&P and Fitch have both said that GDP will fall by 5% in FY21. Moody's also said that it would fall by 4%. According to you, what will be the GDP contraction rate in this fiscal, and why?
First of all, thank you, Kaushal, for giving me this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. Now, coming back to your question, so Indian economy was already slowing down before we got hit by this crisis. So the GDP growth number that has come for FY20 shows that India's economy grew by around 4.2%, which is the lowest since FY09, the global financial crisis. And even this number of 4.2% is likely to be revised lower, because the fourth quarter GDP number of 3.1% looks pretty high, and most probably going forward it will be revised downwards. So we were already going through a slowdown, and then we got hit by this crisis. So the Indian government announced a lockdown, which was the strictest compared to what other economies have done globally. So for the last 2 months or so, around 70% of India's economy had come to a halt. So obviously this is going to have a repercussion on economic growth. If I look at some of the early data indicators that have started coming, the core sector for the month of April, core sector is an index of 8 infrastructure industries, and the core sector growth has fallen by a sharp 40% in the month of April. Exports have fallen by a sharp 60%. So we are already seeing the impact of this lockdown on economic parameters. Now, for the first quarter of this fiscal, April to June, I think the GDP is going to contract by a sharp somewhere around 25 to 30%. And assuming that the economy starts opening up now and continues to open up going forward, then in the second quarter, again, I expect a contraction, but to a lesser degree than the first quarter. And then in the third and fourth quarter, I see the growth improving. But overall, for the fiscal year FY21, I expect the GDP growth to contract by around 5%, or even more, depending on how much time it takes to come back to normalcy. So when I say a contraction of 5%, this is based on the assumption that economy from here will continue to open up. And then the assumption that the infection rate will get contained in the next 1 month or so. So the problem with this crisis is there's this whole lot of uncertainty around it. We really don't know how much time it will take to control this crisis. Hence, it's difficult to assess its impact on the economy. But overall, my base case scenario is a contraction of 5% in FY21.
So, it's interesting you say that. I wanted to actually juxtapose that data with something that I'm seeing. I mean, it's very, very early yet, but a couple of days ago, Mahindra and Mahindra reported its tractor sales for the month of May. And we saw that actually, despite everything that's happening, they sold over 24,000 tractors during the month, which is actually a growth of 2% over financial year 19. And actually, this is pretty good news considering the fact, like you said, almost 70% of the country was locked down, or 70% of all activity was locked down. As Dr. Pawan Goenka of Mahindra and Mahindra said, maybe Bharat will actually carry India. Do you think that rural growth will be strong this year? We are expecting a normal monsoon, and that this will help in fighting the lockdown?
So yes, agri sector is kind of going to be the savior for the economy. So for the last fiscal year, agriculture sector has recorded record food grain production. If I look at the GDP data which came out recently, agriculture sector has recorded a healthy GDP growth of around 4% in FY20. So yes, agriculture sector looks like the positive aspect currently. And the main thing is that agriculture, though it contributes around 15% to our GDP, but a large part of our workforce, around 50%, is employed in the agri and allied sectors. So hence, positive news from there would definitely support the economy. IMD has forecasted a normal monsoon, so let's see. I'm also pretty optimistic on that front.
Okay, so just to add to that, yes, agriculture sector is looking good. Again, like I said, there is lots of bad news, and there's no running away from it. But there are, what I would say, that there are some interesting things that are happening in the economy. One of those things would be the fact that labor market actually improved in the month of May. You would have seen the numbers, right? The number of people who got employed during the month were 21 million, which is an increase of about 7.5% over April. So month on month, we saw 21 million people getting back into the workforce. And out of this 21 million, very interestingly, again, about 14.5 million were small traders and daily wage laborers, who were the most vulnerable and continue to be the most vulnerable to any lockdown. So because they account for about 30% of a third of the country's total population. So as the economy has been, opening up gradually and they come back to business, how long do you think it will be before we see normal levels of employment in the country?
So yes, Kaushal, we have seen some improvement on that front very recently. But there are two things that is going to happen. One, as the economy starts opening up, a lot of workers will again get employed in the workforce. But at the same time, a lot of workers have gone back to their hometowns and villages, and they are not going to come back immediately. So as long as there is this whole uncertainty around the crisis, they would also like to wait and see how things pan out before they decide to come back to the cities and take up their jobs again. So there is going to be a little delay in that workforce coming back to work. And secondly, but that's more of a short-term phenomenon, probably over a period of 3 months or 6 months time, this reverse migration that we've seen in the last few months, that is going to get corrected. But the bigger cause of concern is that some of the jobs may permanently get lost.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, in this kind of economic slowdown, corporates are going to look at cutting costs wherever possible. Hence, many of the jobs may become redundant. Some of the sectors like, say, hospitality, travel, tourism, they are going to get very, very severely impacted. and their recovery is going to be extremely slow and painful. So many of the jobs in those sectors will just cease to exist. So even if, as the economy opens up and things move towards normalcy, yes, the employment level will improve, but some of the jobs are going to get permanently just cease to exist. And even now, even with, this little bit of opening up that has happened so far, if you look at the overall unemployment rate given by CMI, it's still at a high of 24%.
Correct. Yeah,
as against, 8% level that we had pre-COVID. So the situation is still pretty dismal, and going forward, the pain is not going to go away very soon.
So, that leads, it's a perfect segue to my next question. China is seeing almost a V-shaped recovery. Others have, talked about other countries saying U-shaped. Some have talked about W because it'll open, it'll go up, come down again. I even heard L. So which is your favorite alphabet in terms of what you see, happening? Is it going to be more a U shape? Is it going to be a W shape? Assuming, of course, we know that the pandemic will run its course, but with a couple of those caveats, for people on this call, how do you want them to plan? I mean, what should they be planning for as business people?
Okay, so let me tell you how I look at the India's economic growth going forward. So for FY20, like I mentioned, India has recorded GDP growth of 4.2%. For FY21, I expect the growth to contract by around 5%. For FY22, I expect a positive growth of around 5%, or it could be even more, 7%. In fact, IMF is talking about a 7% growth in FY22. But here you have, so yes, on paper, it looks like a V-shaped recovery. But here we have to take into account that the 5% or 7% positive growth that I'm talking about in FY22 is on a very low base of FY21. So that's an important thing that we have to take into account. And it's also based on the assumption, like I said before, it's based on the assumption that from here, the economy will continue to open up, and there will be no further severe disruption due to the virus. And that's something you cannot completely rule out. In case, once things normalize and then again there's a second wave of infection, then probably we'll see a W-shaped recovery. But my base case scenario would be a V-shaped recovery. That's based on the assumption that from here the economy will continue to open up. But, whatever be the shape of the recovery, whether we talk about a V-shaped recovery or a W-shaped recovery, the critical point is that the recovery is going to be painful. And that's because of a couple of reasons. Firstly, like I mentioned before, the economy was already slowing down before it got hit by the crisis. Hence, it's going to be that much more difficult for the economy to recover. Second, we have limited ammunitions in the form of fiscal and monetary stimulus. So RBI has already cut rate by 115 basis points in the last 2 months. Fiscal deficit of India is already slipping because of low tax revenue collections. So this is not to say that we will not have further monetary and fiscal stimulus. I think that there is still some scope. I still feel that RBI will cut rate by another 25 to 50 basis points. I feel there's still chance that the government will come with further fiscal stimulus. But I want to highlight that this limited scope of stimulus going forward, which will make the recovery that much more difficult. And, all the three pillars of India's economic growth, consumption, investment, and exports are going to be severely impacted. With all the job losses and pay cuts that we are talking about, and also this whole income uncertainty, this will result in a huge dip in consumption. And with consumption remaining weak, the expectation is that the investment will also remain weak, because private sector is not going to go ahead with their investment plans.
Right. So, that's a perfect lead in to my, to my related question, that according to a survey done by Nielsen a few days ago, COVID has hit the income of about 60% of households. And this, coupled with the lockdown, has caused consumer spending to drop significantly, as we all know. White goods, okay, I mean, FMCG, not even white goods. FMCG contracted by 34%. I think it's the highest ever single month contraction we've seen in FMCG in India. We had zero automobile sales in April, and white goods sales for Q1 are expected to be down 50%. So I'm using three, both the durables as well as FMCG and then white goods. All three are impacted, like you said, all consumer goods. Unlike China, we are a domestic consumption-led economy. We all know that. Question is, what steps should the government take to bring back consumption spending in the economy? Are we talking about, direct benefit transfers of a larger amount? What else can be done in order to bring back consumer spending? Because it's all a function of optimism in some sense. And right now, we're all pessimistic.
So yes, Kaushal, very true. With all the job losses and pay cuts, this has taken a huge toll on consumer sentiments. And obviously, consumer spending is going to get adversely impacted, especially consumer discretionary items. The demand for that will remain weak. So what can the government do about it? I think what is really required at this point is to give more money in the hands of people. This could be either in the form of direct benefit transfer, or it could be in the form of tax cut, could be income tax cut, or GST rate cut for a temporary period of time. But these things are easier said than done because we are aware of the fiscal constraints of the government. But still, for an immediate boost to consumption, what is really required is to give more money in the hands of people to encourage them to spend.
Right. So, obviously, I didn't expect it to be any different, but lots of questions coming in, and some on real estate. Someone's asked, urban commercial real estate. What do you think? What's your outlook on urban commercial real estate now that people have actually become comfortable working from home? On the other hand, corporates themselves have seen that, yes, this can happen. So let's cut costs, which are rentals. I know my CFO would be happily jumping down if he could, up and down if he could cut some costs there. And improving human productivity. I mean, we all know Mumbai traffic or, traffic in most parts of India, the amount of time and productivity we lose in commuting. So what's your outlook on urban commercial real estate?
So commercial real estate in India was actually doing pretty well before we got hit by this crisis. For 2019, commercial real estate recorded record transactions. And this was mainly being supported by demand from ITES sector. Now, with this crisis, even commercial real estate sector would get adversely impacted. There is concern that most of the domestic as well as global corporates would probably defer the expansion plans, and hence that would take a toll on office demand. Now, coming specifically to work from home, yes, there are concerns on that front. So what has happened is that in the last 2 months or so, most of the corporates were forced to work from home. And given that the corporates adapted very well to it, now there is increased talk about moving more permanently towards work from home. So yes, definitely there are benefits of working from home. Like you mentioned, the productivity improvement by cutting on the commute time. Then also the ITES company, they're talking about a large pool of talent that will get available to them by working from home, which was not otherwise available to them. But here I would like to highlight that I don't see a significant move towards work from home on a permanent basis in the long term. And that's mainly because of a lot of challenges in working from home. Just to name some, there would be problems related to productivity, then the home infrastructure. Not everyone's home is equipped to work from home. Then the whole global data protection issues. So there are a whole lot of other issues that are also there with work from home. So I don't see a significant permanent shift happening. And in fact, if we look at the savings that companies will be able to do by moving to work from home, so even that is not very significant. So we did a study which showed that for ITES company, their real estate operating expenditure, which includes the rentals as well as other expenses like facility management and common area maintenance and all other expenses related to office, it's only around 3 to 4.5% of their sales. So it's not that they're going to make significant savings by moving to work from home. And then to add to that, they will have to incur additional expenditure for setting up that home infrastructure. So even on the cost front, it doesn't make much sense to do something like that. So hence, yes, some part of the workforce may shift to work from home, given that, companies have seen that it's possible to do that and possible to do that very effectively. But I don't see a very significant move happening in the long run.
Okay. No, that's, I'm sure that will be interesting for a lot of developers who are on this chat, because, obviously the concern is we are already getting hammered on residential. What happens if commercial also goes away? And especially given, like you said, MNCs may defer and delay their plans of coming in. I don't think they'll not come in. It's just a question of timing. But, will they say, okay, now we are preparing for 70% of our workforce to be in office and 30% to work from home? Sales guys, anyway, you say, they're out. So, you do hot desking and all of that. But it'd be interesting. So I'm glad you're saying that there is, you're not seeing that as a permanent shift. Now, the government announced this 20 lakh crore stimulus package earlier this month. Now, experts have said that this stimulus accounted to, 1 to 1.3% of GDP. I don't want to quibble. The government has a different number. I don't want to quibble on what percentage of the GDP this constitutes or whether this amount is sufficient. My question is whether the package in its current avatar can actually stimulate the economy, particularly demand. A lot of it is supply side, but I'm saying demand. What can be done for demand? And which parts of the stimulus you as an economist found particularly useful for trade and industry?
Okay. If we look at the fiscal stimulus of this package, like you said, only around 1% is going into fiscal spending. So only around 1% is going from government accounts. Whereas the rest of the stimulus package, most of it is in the form of liquidity injection. Of the total stimulus, around 40% of it, rupees 8 lakh crores, would be in the form of different measures to inject liquidity into the system. So yes, this was much required at this point in time, and it would be very helpful for the economy. It will help to pick up the credit cycle in the economy. But we should also see it in light of the fact that at this juncture, the banks and NBFCs are going to be very risk averse. Individuals and corporates will also have very limited risk appetite. So this whole liquidity injection, while it will help to lubricate the working capital requirement of the economy, it will not significantly boost consumption or investment demand in the economy. But that's not to deny that this liquidity support was much required at this point in time, and that is what most of the global economies have also done. And specifically, I would say that the liquidity measures that have been announced for the NBFC sector is a very positive step, because a lot of MSMEs are dependent on the NBFC sector. Then even sector like real estate is very highly dependent on NBFC sector. So whatever support has been given to the NBFC sector would definitely help the economy in picking up the credit cycle. Secondly, I would say the announcements that have been done for the MSME segment was much required at this point. MSMEs are the backbone of India's economy, and they have been very adversely impacted by this crisis. So whatever support has been given to them in the form of collateral-free loan or liquidity injections are very positive steps. Then the government has also announced some measures that would improve the ease of doing business, which I would say is again a positive step.
Provided it gets implemented. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but a lot of people on this chat will agree. A lot of these announcements, a lot of MSMEs have told me that, all these schemes are announced, but if you go to the bank branch, a small credit branch, they're completely clueless, because the devil is in the details and in the execution. So I think, while the intent may be there, making it real, I think is going to equally matter, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely. Because there's no point announcing just measures which cannot be implemented on ground. So yes, that if it has to be implemented properly for it to be effective. Then, in fact, the other thing I would like to highlight is that government took this opportunity to also announce some long-term reform measures. And here I would like to highlight the announcements that they have done for the agriculture sector in terms of amendment to the Essential Commodities Act or some of the marketing reforms that they have announced. So these are definitely very good. And then the reforms announced for the coal sector in the form of allowing commercial coal mining. So these are steps which will not immediately lead to any benefit. In the short run, it won't impact the economy, but in the long run, these are positive steps. Now, coming specifically to your questions on supporting demand in the economy, yes, on that front, there has not been too many announcements. Government did announce some small cash transfers to the poor and needy. Government has increased the allocation for Manrega, but those are very, very small steps and very minimal and not really enough to invigorate demand in the economy. So definitely more stimulus is required to directly impact demand in the economy. And I still feel that there is still a possibility that government will come again and announce further stimulus measure. Probably the government is waiting to see how this crisis pans out and then announce further stimulus as required. So I'm still hopeful of further fiscal stimulus.
But do we have room for that stimulus, Rajni? I mean, we've already seen the Moody's downgrade. There have been unconfirmed reports that other rating agencies are looking to downgrade us. We are just about investment grade. India, our rating is just about investment grade. If we drop further, we'll be in the junk category. Am I correct in my assumption that right? So if you're going to be, do you think we should be concerned? Is there enough space for the government to do what it needs to do or wants to do in this current environment?
So yes, let me talk a little first about how the fiscal deficit situation is currently. So for FY21, the government had budgeted a fiscal deficit of 3.5%. And this was based on an assumption of nominal GDP growth of 10%. Now, with COVID, the situation has completely changed. Now we are looking at a scenario where probably there is going to be no growth in nominal GDP. Hence, this is going to have a severe impact on government's revenue collection. So we have already got the data for the month of April, and the government's net tax revenue collection for April has fallen by a sharp 70%. So yes, there is going to be severe pressure on government's fiscal deficit because the revenue collection, both tax and non-tax revenue, is going to fall sharply. I expect that the government's fiscal deficit from here, center plus state, is likely to rise to around 12% or so.
Wow.
Yes. And like you rightly said, there are concerns on rating downgrade happening going forward because of this. But here I would like to highlight that government should not worry too much about rating downgrade because these are unprecedented times. And this fiscal stimulus is much required at this point. If the government does not announce any further stimulus, it will result to a very sharp contraction in the economy. And anyways, that will result in fiscal deficit widening. So, and the rating agencies would also be cognizant of the fact that it's a global crisis. It's not anything to do with India's fundamentals particularly. Hence, I think the government should go ahead and take that risk and give further fiscal stimulus as required.
Well, that's a relief to many of us on this call. We're very, very happy that you actually said that. What would your message to banks be? Because, the banks were already stressed. The banking sector was stressed before the COVID-19 crisis began. And the stimulus package requires them to lend aggressively to vulnerable sectors, on currently, right? So on one hand, you've got, them being pushed to lend. On the other hand, you have the fact that the many sections and provisions of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code have been suspended for a year. Fitch and others are saying that this could result in an impairment, a further growth in the impairment, impaired assets of banks. And asset quality is going to drop. And there's going to be a 2 to 6 percentage points, so 200 to 600 bips of bank impairment ratios increasing. So should we be worried about the fragility of the Indian banking sector?
Yes, definitely. That's a big cause of concern. And like you mentioned, Kaushal, the financial sector was already going through a painful phase. Banking sector NPAs were already rising. RBI in December, when they came out with their financial stability report, they estimated that banks NPAs were estimated to rise to around 9.9% by September 2020 from 9.3%. So yes, banks were having their own issues. NBFC sector was also going through its own crisis post the ILFS fiasco. Banks were not willing to lend to the NBFC sector. The cost of funds had gone up for them. And hence, a lot of sectors that were dependent on the NBFC sector were severely impacted by lack of credit. So yes, the financial sector, banks and NBFCs were going through a painful phase. I found this on the web for impacted by lack of credit. Check it out. And now their situation is going to get aggravated by this whole crisis. So what I feel is that the government really needs to come here and support the banking sector. I think the RBI should allow one-time restructuring of loans by banks. The government should come and announce further aggressive recapitalization of public sector banks. So some support to banking sector would definitely be required with this crisis.
It's very interesting you said that, because on our previous episode of this series of the Rubik's Knowledge series, we had our Rubik's non-executive chairman, Mr. Tangsale, who is the former chairman and managing director of Central Bank of India and the former CEO of Indian Banks Association. And he also said that, OTS, the one-time settlement, is a tool that should be made available, because especially from a provisioning perspective, because if you don't do that, banks are going to be, faced with a double whammy in many, completely as a result of the situation. So there is a question from Professor Prabhu, Professor Chetan Prabhu here, and very interesting question, that the supply chain is very critical to the manufacturing sector. We know that the supply chain has been severely disrupted right now. What do you expect the impact of this disruption on the manufacturing sector to be, and how long will manufacturing revival take? So any projections on manufacturing sector impact, how much it's going to degrow, if you can recall the numbers,
So manufacturing sector revival would be really dependent on how much time it takes for this lockdown to ease. See, things have started opening up, but still there are huge supply bottlenecks, because some states have opened up more, some states are still not fully open. So this is causing a lot of supply bottlenecks. And then there is this whole labor issue, because a lot of labor has migrated back and they are not going to come back pretty soon. Till the whole uncertainty around this crisis settles down, they wouldn't be keen to come back to the cities. So the revival would take time, depending on how much time it takes for the economy to come back to normalcy. But even once this whole lockdown opens up and the economic activity fully resumes, still the manufacturing sector will find it very difficult to revive to the 2019 level, because there would be a huge impact on demand in the economy.
So you're saying FY22 beyond?
So,
or is that stargazing, crystal ball gazing?
Yes, by FY22, things will come back to around FY20 level. But FY21 is going to be a difficult year, because there is going to be some permanent demand destruction because of this crisis. So even after this whole supply bottleneck is corrected, the sector will get hit by weak demand.
Right. We have a number of exporters on this call. So I have a couple of questions around exports. The first one being that our exports fell in April by 60%, as you called out. There are only two sectors where exports grew actually, and in that month, and that was pharma and iron ore. I think May also has been a significant decline, about 30%. 35% nearly. a lot, this drop in exports has been combined with a drop in imports. And as a result, our trade deficit is about $6.7 billion currently, which is the lowest level actually, the trade deficit in 4 years, since May 2016. Exactly in May 6, 2016, we were, so it's at its lowest. How do you see exports play out in the year ahead? And are you worried about the fact that an increase in oil prices could actually impact our trade deficit? Or do you think that oil prices will remain benign and we don't have to really worry about the trade deficit this year?
So this crisis is a global crisis, and it has impacted demand in all the economies. So IMF is estimating the global GDP growth to fall by around 3% in 2020. So obviously, this is going to take a toll on the global demand, and India's exports will be no exception. So it is going to be a very difficult year for India's exports. Now, coming to import and crude oil prices. So crude oil prices, if we see what has been happening in the last 1 week or so, crude oil prices have slowly started inching up. And that's mainly because of expectation in the market that OPEC is going to announce some sharp cut in production. And also because there's some recovery in demand as global economies have started opening up. But over a longer period of time, the kind of global growth that we are talking about, in fact, global contraction that we are talking about, the demand for oil is going to remain weak. Hence, I do not see much concern on the global crude oil price front. I think crude oil prices will remain benign, and that will be a big positive for India's economy. In fact, the expectation is that current account is likely to move to surplus in FY21.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And that would be a big positive, especially at a time when there is threat of huge FII outflows happening in midst of all this uncertainty. So yes, this benign crude oil prices would be a big positive for India's economy.
Right. And a related question, and in some sense you answered it in your earlier response with talking about a trade surplus. So what do you see happening with the US dollar in the year ahead? Again, lots of exporters on the call. So, what do you see happening on that front?
So if we look at Indian rupee, the Indian rupee has weakened by around 4% since the beginning of March. Now, this is lower than what we have seen for many other emerging market currencies like Brazilian real, which has weakened very sharply. And one thing that has been in favor of India's rupee is this current account situation, which I just spoke about. The low crude oil prices and probability of current account moving to surplus has been supporting Indian rupee. And then another positive is that India has huge forex reserves, which is also supporting Indian rupee. But going forward, what will be critical is what happens to FII flows. So in the month of March, we have seen huge FII outflows happening from India's equity and debt market. We saw FII outflows to the tune of around $15 billion. So in the month of April and May, then the outflows have significantly reduced. But yes, what happens to FII outflows going forward will be very critical in determining the direction of Indian rupee. But broadly, I expect that the upward pressure, a weakening pressure on rupee will continue going forward. And in case there is a rating downgrade, of which I still feel the probability is low, but if something like that happens, then definitely there would be a very sharp weakening in Indian rupee.
Okay. Again, lots of questions coming in, some around manufacturing and construction. So let me pick up one which impacts both sectors. That industry is concerned, and construction industry is concerned that a lot of migrant workers have left, and then therefore there is a serious shortage of labor post the lockdown opening. Right. So as business gets back, their pockets and pockets are emptied. All the Shramik specials have taken people home, etc. So real estate, infrastructure, and manufacturing are facing this challenge. This shortage could actually cause wage inflation, right? If the shortage of labor and hurt industry when industry is already on its knees. We are already on the knees, and now if people costs go up, are these thoughts and concerns on whether wage inflation is a serious concern? Is it overblown? Do you think it's a legitimate concern or an important concern that wage inflation can happen, or do you think it's overblown?
So currently, this reverse migration that we are seeing is a big cause of concern for many of the sectors, including manufacturing and construction sector. If we look at the size of the problem, now it's difficult to estimate the size of migrant workers in India. But broadly, one of the recent estimates I read is that there are around 4 crores of migrant workers, and of that, around 75 lakhs have gone back to their villages. So as you can see, this is a big problem currently. A lot of projects are stuck because of lack of labor, and a lot of projects are moving very slowly because of fewer workers. And yes, wage inflation has gone up currently. And the concern is that probably they are not going to come back in the next months or so. Probably it's going to be a little longer.
Also, sorry, as one of the questioners said, that there are government incentives being given in many ways for them to stay at home. And then there are states like UP saying that you need to take our permission if they're to go. So if they do stay at home, this could take longer, was the...
Yes, this is the concern right now. It can take longer, but still it's a short-term phenomenon. If not 3 months, maybe it will take 5 months, maybe it will take 6 months. But these laborers are going to come back to the cities and going to come back to their jobs. Because even with all the support measures being given to them, there is a reason why all these workers had migrated to these cities. There are not enough income earning opportunities in their hometowns and villages. So they would be eager to come back, and they would just be waiting for things to normalize, for this whole uncertainty to settle down before they come back. So, but I feel that it's more of a short-term phase. Difficult to say 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, but I see it just as a short-term phase. And it should get corrected in few months' time.
Right. So one of the folks on the call is asking that, Moody's announced this rating downgrade, and they were categorical in saying that this has happened during the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, but it is not driven by the impact of the pandemic, in their release. So, I mean, what do you think would cause a downgrade at this point of time? During the pandemic, what would have led them to downgrade, and what do you personally expect the impact to be? Why I'm asking this also, as the person correctly pointed out, is that the markets don't seem to have reacted negatively to this news, right? Equity markets have normally, with a downgrade, you see a sharp correction, but here you're seeing, in fact, a pullback to some extent. So what's your reading on this downgrade? Is it just something that was overdue? And
so let me take you through the reasons given by Moody's for the downgrade. So like you said, they categorically said it's not because of the current crisis. So the reasons they outlined was because of lack of reforms. They said the sustained slow economic growth. They spoke about stress in the financial sector, and they spoke about the pressure on the central and state government's fiscal deficit. So yes, those concerns are there. Now, what's going to be the impact of this downgrade on the economy or on the markets? There is not going to be much impact because this was more or less expected. So with this rating downgrade, Moody's has just got India's rating at par with what the other rating agencies, S&P and Fitch, are saying.
Yeah.
So this was an expected lines, and the market is not going to react much to this. This is more like a warning signal that if things deteriorate beyond this, then there are chances of the rating agencies moving India to junk grade, which would be a cause of concern. So this is more like a warning signal and not really currently a cause of concern.
Right. So, there is an interesting question from Mr. Vijay Srivastav here. And that question is related to two of the sectors that have been really badly hit, which is auto and aviation. And they're saying, So what are some of the steps that can be taken in order to boost demand for auto sector, which is manufacturing, of course, and aviation in view of COVID? Assume that it's going to be around for a year, because the last thing you want is another aviation company going under or a large auto company going under. Is there something that the government can do in order to try and help these sectors? I mean, any thoughts on that? I'm sure, uh, aviation is on everyone's mind right now, but you're seeing things open up. So what's your assessment of the situation there?
So, for both these sectors, auto and aviation, the pain is going to be there for some time. Auto sector was, in fact, both the sectors were already going through a very rough patch before the crisis. So, hence, this crisis is going to be make it that much more difficult for these two sectors to revive. Now, for something like aviation, even with things opening up, people are going to do only the bare minimum traveling required. A lot of traveling which was happening, in terms of tourism related or business related, is not going to be there, at least for a couple of years, because people have seen and experienced that it's possible to connect and work through a lot of other ways virtually, and hence they wouldn't want to take any risk. And so a lot of this demand which was there for aviation sector is not going to be there. The same is going to be the case for auto sector. Auto sector, yes, there could initially be some pent up demand. People will foresee that it's not a good idea to travel by public transport, so yes, if I don't have a car, let me buy a minimum whatever I can afford, a basic car. So that kind of demand will come. But a big ticket purchase may not happen, because people would just defer all these buying decisions in midst of all these uncertainties. So the pain for them is going to be there. What the government needs to do is come out specifically. So far, whatever announcement the government has announced, there's nothing specifically targeted at sectors.
Correct, exactly.
General announcement, but they should come up with measures targeted at some of these sectors like aviation, auto, travel, tourism. Otherwise, these sectors will be unable to revive. And in fact, some of the support given, like I spoke about, to the banking sector in the form of further recapitalization and restructuring of loan, those would also help these sectors.
But do you think that recapitalizing the banks, I mean, all your other suggestions and targeted, schemes, I think that's a fabulous point, right? I think we're seeing a broad brush approach. We're not seeing a sector specific set of measures, which actually would make a lot of sense. And I think that's a fabulous point you've made. It's a great takeaway. The issue is that, with respect to recapitalizing the banking sector, do you think that there is, as always, the question comes when you talk about recapitalizing, the worry of moral hazard, that you privatize profits and you democratize, sort of losses?
So, yes, those concerns are there. In fact, the RBI also has inhibitions in coming up with restructuring of loan, because they are worried that it could be misused, like what happened post 2008 when they did when they allowed banks to do one-time restructuring. So those concerns are there, but we have to take into account that this is really unprecedented, this crisis, and the government has to take the risk and go ahead and take these bold steps. It's much required at this point in time. And recapitalization, in fact, government has been doing, but what I'm saying, there is need to do a significant amount and at one go, so that it really makes a difference and helps in picking up the credit cycle in the economy.
Right. There's a fabulous question from Mr. Manjunath at 3M. And this question is that, where does India stand globally compared with other countries in terms of recovery? When I say recovery, meaning economic recovery. Like China, we've seen a great deal of a V-shaped recovery. So where does India stand, and what can be done in order to speed up this recovery? And how are MNCs going to see India as an opportunity to grow again, or is it going to be gloom and doom?
So, okay, coming to the first part, compared to global economies, the lockdown announced in India was one of the strictest. Hence, the impact on the economy is going to be very severe. But at the same time, IMF, if I look at what the IMF has been projecting for 2020, they have projected a GDP growth of 1.9% for India. And hence, India is amongst one of the fastest growing economies in 2020. But I think this 1.9% is pretty high and it will be lowered
Of
going
course.
forward. So my view is that impact on India is going to be very severe because simply because the lockdown here is much more severe. And we also have to take into account some of the features which are very typical to India, in the sense we have huge exposure to MSMEs. We have a large unorganized sector as against many of the developed countries. And in sectors like that, unorganized sectors and MSMEs, they are going to find it very difficult to sustain this crisis. So hence the impact here is going to be very severe. But yes, if we look at what has been happening in some of the developed economies, there also the story is pretty dismal.
Right.
So
And
in that,
MNCs, will the interest in India remain, grow, given that, we're trying to attract people away from China, or at least that's the stated intent of the government in terms of saying that let's attract in India. Various state governments have said that. Uh, you know,
so I think MNC's interest in India will remain because they would be looking more at long-term prospects. And if you look at India's long-term growth story, nothing has changed. Whatever
right,
happened is because of this crisis, and it should get corrected in 2 years, 3 years. But when an MNC comes to India, they're looking more at the long-term growth potential. They are looking more at factors like, the demography, the huge consumption market here, the talent pool. So those things are still going to be there. In fact, now there's increased expectation that some of the MNCs may look at reducing the exposure to China, and hence they may look favorably at a country like India. So this expectation is there in the market, but here again, it's not going to be that easy because the whole lot of other, policies by the government would also be critical in attracting these investors or these manufacturers to India from China.
right. Any thoughts on the power sector? I mean, on one hand, you're you're going to see that industrial growth has dropped. So there's a question from a panelist that industrial growth has slowed down, but people have been home. There's so where do you see the power sector going? I mean, in terms of recovery from here on, any thoughts on the power sector?
So, in terms of demand, as things start opening up, we will see a big spurt in demand, and we have already seen electricity consumption quickly bouncing back to once the economy has started opening up. So, in that sense, things will normalize in the next few months in terms of demand. But yes, power sector has a whole lot of other problems which they will have to grapple with. Government has announced some measures in terms of liquidity injection for the power distribution companies, which was much required at this point in time. But some of their other concerns, I think they will have to sort it out anyways, irrespective of this crisis.
Right. So yeah, I think we saw the scheme for discoms, so that
Yeah.
takes hopefully some pressure away. There is one interesting question from Rohit, and this question is, the government has talked about being self-dependent, Atmanirbhar, as the Prime Minister said. And you want to encourage domestic consumption, uh, which is like which is not a bad thing to do. You need to promote your own industry, but when you compare the costs of our and both the costing as well as the pricing of our domestic manufacturers, we tend to be significantly higher than markets such as China or producers such as China. This is going to put a lot of pressure on domestic producers. This demand to go Atmanirbhar, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on costs and pricing. How do you see that playing out? Do you think that overall, in terms of productivity, this will help us in terms of becoming more price efficient? Or do you see that this could have another impact in terms of lower quality, more jugaad, all of that kind of stuff? I mean, where do you see this fall? Is it a good thing?
So yes, on paper it's a good thing, but eventually businesses will look at the cheapest source from where they can source. So then they will not look at whether so whether they should source it from the domestic market just because they want to be self-dependent and they do not want to other countries. They will only look at what is the cheapest source, and if the cheapest source is China, they will go to China eventually once things settle down. So currently there's a lot of this focus that we should only source domestic produce and all those things, but over a longer period of time, for efficiency of the whole system, the domestic manufacturers will also look keenly at what is the most cheapest and efficient source of procuring any item. So I do not think that will this is something which will last. For that, it's important for us to ensure that we truly deserve it. It can't come directly from the government. We have to look at ways in which we can lower our cost of production.
Right. So, I think we're running out of time. It is 3:58 in my watch, but I want to take ask you one final question with your permission, Rajni, and that is that if you were the finance minister currently, what are the top 2 or 3 things on your agenda that you would do in order to help the economy revive in the fastest possible manner? If you had a clean slate and you were given a carte blanche to do whatever you wanted, what were the 3 things that you would do?
So one, I would look at announcing more measures to boost demand in the economy. And I would look at tax cuts. It could be in the form of income tax cut, like I said, and especially for the lower income category, because that would not make a huge impact on the government's finances, but at the same time, it will give a big boost to consumer sentiment. So I would look at something like that. I would look at cutting GST rate, and these measures for a temporary period of time because there are fiscal constraints. And I would not worry too much about rating downgrade, because if there is a need for fiscal stimulus, I think the government should go ahead and announce some more stimulus measures. The government should take some risk on that front. The other thing I would do is announce more sector-specific measures, because right now, whatever the government has announced is more of broader measures, liquidity injection, partial credit guarantee, collateral-free loans, and things like that. But I would announce some measures specifically targeted at sectors like travel, tourism, hospitality, aviation, because these sectors also are huge employment generator. And if the government does not take care of these sectors, then there's going to be huge repercussions on the whole economy. Okay. So I would say, and give more money in the hands of people through tax cuts and announce more sector-specific measures.
Okay. Rajni, it has been such a pleasure having you with us today, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as a part of the Rubik's Knowledge series. It is truly, we are truly grateful to have you here. And folks, thank you for attending the program. All of you in the audience, I hope you do enjoy that you enjoyed it. Our next session is coming up on Saturday at 11 o'clock, where we're going to be talking to a few CFOs on how they see this economic situation play out for companies, and what measures they're taking to deal with the situation going forward as we enter, as we exit the lockdown. So we have the CFO of Shimla, Ms. Sandhya Sharma, who's going to be with us, and the CFO of Crystal Crop Care, Mr. Sumit Sood, and possibly a couple of other names. We'll keep you posted. We look forward to seeing you back. Rajni, thank you once again, and we're very grateful for your time today. And good luck, and stay safe. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
My pleasure.